All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. And those of you who are making time to listen to this later than live. I'm excited about this panel today, Strength in Numbers, the Impact of Teaching and Learning Partnerships, is going to be a panel discussion sharing faculty member and learning design partnerships. Stevie Rocco, the Dutton Institute's Director of Learning Design, is going to moderate today's panel and has hand-selected our panelists. So we're excited to introduce this as part of our 125th anniversary celebration of the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences. And with that, I will get out of the way and turn it over to you, Stevie.
Great. First, if we could just have the pairs introduce themselves really quickly, and I'll just call out the pair and then the two of you can say hello and to everyone. Mark and Jim.
Okay, I'll start. My name is Mark Worley. I'm the learning designer at the Dutton Institute, and I've worked with Jim Adair for quite some time.
Yes, I'm Jim Adair, and I've worked with Mark Worley for quite some time. I'm a professor of material science and pharmacology and biomedical engineering and teach some fairly arcane biomaterial type courses and use lots on Canvas. I set up collaborative teams because that's what we do in medical development, and Mark has been awesome.
Kiara and Jane. Whoever wants to go first.
Jane, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm a learning designer in the John A. Dutton Education Institute, and Kiara and I first met actually on the Diversity Council, which was great, and then had an opportunity to work together thanks to COVID more and more. So that I'm telling you has been a silver lining for me of the whole COVID experience.
Thank you, Jane. I think, yeah, you're too kind. So I'm Chiara Loprete, Associate Professor of Energy Economics and Energy and Mineral Engineering. I started working with Jane in, spring 2020. I was teaching at the time EBF 200, which is a second year course in EME that teaches the basics of energy economics. And Jane was just incredibly helpful. I cannot say it in words how helpful she was to just transition, as many of us had to do from day to night, from teaching an in-person class. I had, I think, 60 or 70 people to just switching online right away. And so I started with her in 200, and then we continued last fall with 483, which is a slightly more advanced course on electricity economics. But Jane has been truly a silver lining and a wonderful, wonderful collaborator. So she's taught me so much, and I'm very, very grateful that I had the opportunity to work with her.
And April and Tim.
Shall I go first, April?
Sure.
Okay, I'm Tim Braillard, the professor of geosciences, and I started working with April, I think it was 2012, and we just got a large NSF grant to be the online arm of a science and learning center, a STEP center, I think it was, called Integrate. And through the center, we developed 5 online classes to join a 6th online class. And we now have a certificate in Earth sustainability. And I teach 2 of the classes. Is Earth Futures, Impacts and Climate Change, and a course on coastal processes and hazards and policy. And in addition to that, we have courses in energy, water, and food, and a modeling class. And so April was the lead designer, but we've also had quite a bit of help from Kim Crossman and Beth Bailey. And basically, I'll have to be honest, I don't think the whole program would exist if it hadn't been for April's guidance and her leadership in designing the materials and making them effective. And I'll be talking more about that in a little bit, but she's been absolutely central to the development of our program and its success with, I don't know how many students we've had, but we've had probably a couple hundred go through at this point.
Well, thank you, Tim. My name is April Millay. I'm a learning designer in the Dutton Institute, and I was trying to figure out this morning how many years it's been. I was like, it's coming up on 10 years we've been working together on those courses, and it's been a pleasure. So thank you.
I think some of the groups covered this already, but I'm going to ask anyway, and maybe we can flesh it out a little bit. So what is the story of how each of the two of you came to collaborate? What precipitated the collaboration? I think Tim mentioned the NSF grant that they got, but Jim, do you remember what prompted the collaboration that you've had with Mark over time?
Well, we started Canvas, and one of the things I do in my courses, in the homework part, I form student teams, and I guess you could say I force them to collaborate. And the student teams are randomly selected because otherwise friends just gather together, and it's not really a true collaboration. And so I needed lots of help from Mark, because one of the things that I needed was peer review, and for the students within each team to evaluate their peers in that team. That one we just really got implemented in the last year and a half or so. In the didactic training, I use Jeopardy. We have Jeopardy competitions about advanced surface energetics. And that's also the student teams. And I was kind of shocked and happiness how aggressive the students seem very laid back nowadays, and they're not. They're very competitive, and that was terrific. And Mark helped me implement that in a lot of ways. And then just in general, we have online examinations. And just this past year, we developed and compiled a bunch of questions. We have 450 questions. This is one of the first courses the students take in biomaterials. And Mark helped me implement the exams around those 450 questions. And quite frankly, they get the questions and answers in the Jeopardy competition, but we have 3 exams of 50 questions, and we're building up databases of about 150 questions for each exam. And the students study and learn the didactic training, but not in a very, memorize this stuff way. I try to encourage learning to know it, because these students may be making life and death decisions for a startup biomedical company in less than a year. So Mark helped a lot with that one too. And Mark, can you think of the many other things in which you made a contribution?
Well, it was interesting because Jim and I didn't get put together because of COVID, although I seem to remember helping you out a little bit with your video presentations and how to do the online lectures, but
Quite a bit.
We started well before that. And what you didn't mention, Jim, is how many students in your class where you were trying to manage the peer reviews?
At least 200 every year.
So Jim was manually looking through peer reviews and trying to evaluate groups' performances. But I became aware of a World Campus tool that really does a very good job of combining the Canvas groups that you've already set up with a peer review that fills in student names, groups everyone together, and spits out a really nice spreadsheet, basically, of everyone's evaluation of one another. So,
and it makes it very easy to scan and see where there are trouble spots in particular groups. And I've been known to dissolve groups that were just simply too dysfunctional to move forward. It happens. It happens in research too. I'm sure all of us have had talks with colleagues and everyone got excited, but they just weren't quite functional. That happens. But it's fairly rare, actually. And I've only dissolved one group in the past 3 years.
Kiara and Jane, how did you all, you met on the diversity committee and then what happened?
COVID.
That COVID happened, right?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I remember. I wonder if I still have the first video, Jane. The one. So I again, like from one day to another, I was like told, "Oh, now you go on Zoom," and I remember Jane. I think we had a meeting. Do you remember in Hostler 104 where Jane was trying to help me out? Put a microphone that would be connected to my laptop because I mean I had never used Zoom or anything like that, right? So I was still experimenting. I think a lot of us were at the time, and I started playing around with all these new tools that I'd never used, and Jane was incredibly helpful again from day one onwards. I think she was super helpful to, I think, so first of all, yeah, setting up all the exams on Canvas. I think I sent her endless emails trying to make sure that all the settings were right and everything would be fine. And she was always very responsive and very helpful in checking all these things. I think another item where you helped me was do you remember the Google survey at the end of EBF 200? So I have a very interactive kind of teaching style in general. And I think at the time what I was trying to do is I was trying to have students participate and evaluate their peers' presentations. And generally they do it in class, but at that time we had a challenge because everybody was at home, and Jane was super helpful because she pretty much designed a little survey that then students could take to evaluate their peers. And again, I couldn't have done it without her because I simply didn't know how to do it. What else? I think you were there a number of times during my Zoom lectures because I was trying to manage people, put them into rooms, and it was a little bit chaotic at the beginning. There were some Zoom settings that were not working. I think now everything is much better. But like I said, I don't think that that transitioning from an in-person class to a totally online or hybrid version of my course would have been possible without her incredible help. So I'm very grateful. Thank you, Jane.
Well, I was also equally impressed too, the way she has her class structured, and it is very interactive throughout the entire class. And then also, yeah, transitioning that very active to online can be very difficult. And so we struggled with getting folks in groups, TASM take a quiz during class, like short little quizzes so they can interact with that and with teams, and then getting that coordinated, turning it on and off in Canvas, and getting the polling working. And then impressively, by the end, I mean, she was managing Poll Everywhere, her iPad drawing, and doing illustrations and the PowerPoint and interacting with all of these tools and being able to present. And yeah, I was super impressed with the lectures at the end because they were not only interactive, but visual, and everything ran smoothly. And yeah, it was super impressive.
That's great. I'm going to move to the second question. I'm going to direct this one to April and Tim first. I just to each of you, and I'm guessing the concerns would be different. Did you have any concerns or challenges in collaborating with each other, even at first on your project? And I picked you two first because I know you had a complicated one.
April, you better go first because I can't remember what that was.
Leah, I'm trying to think. It was like almost 10 years ago at this point. Well, I was new at the Dutton Institute at the time. I had just come over from SMEAL, and the entire like model of the way that the differences between the way that Smeal does learning design and Dutton does learning design was very different. So I was learning a new system and obviously meeting new faculty members. And, I don't know, I think my biggest concern back then was that I was going to do it right. And, not like completely screw something up. So, and I know that we had like, for this program, there were multiple courses going on at the same time. So I was juggling a lot of faculty members because I remember like one of the classes that I was designing had 11 different people as content experts. And we were trying to like make sure that we were getting the content that they were supposed to be sending in. And then I'd have to basically, sick Tim on them because they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. And for this particular program, it was a course that we worked with faculty members from multiple universities. They weren't all Penn State faculty members. So it was a very tricky balance of trying to know when to say something and when not to say something. And so I think a lot of my trepidation early on was just not stepping on any like landmines and kind of like having a really unfortunate situation going on. And so, I think that was probably the biggest thing. And then, once I started getting to know Tim, a lot of that kind of calmed down because I knew that once we got to know each other and we started building that relationship between us, that I knew that he would have my back with these faculty members that I didn't know. And graduate students, research associates. I mean, there were just so many faculty members throughout this entire process. So, I think that was probably my biggest kind of concern as I started working with Tim.
Yeah, the other thing I can remember, April, was remember the Science Education Research Center at Carleton, who were the front end of the project. They were the lead institute, and they had their own content management system, which was really quirky. So everything that we developed, we had to put on Drupal as well as on theirs. And then we had to get an interface between them, and they were helping us with that. So it became really complicated because if we changed something on Drupal, it wouldn't change on theirs. And then we also had to pass every course through a really complicated 100-point rubric. Yep. It was graded by an education specialist who's basically most of whom spoke a different language to me as a scientist. April understood it better than I did, but it was a really complicated process. And like April said, there were dozens of people involved, and I was the lead prof on. I remember doing food and energy, and Maureen Feynman did water. I did the modeling class. So I can't remember. No, she did energy. I did modeling and food, and it was a really complicated juggling act. Lots of people, some of whom created materials right away for us, some of whom didn't. But I think the overarching thing that made everything successful is April was involved in all of these classes to a degree. And so she could streamline them all so they end up looking the same, even though they were created by different people. We had people in Colorado, we had people in Pennsylvania, we had people in Louisiana and Massachusetts and New York, creating all these materials. Different expertises. We had engineers. We had engineer and University of New Orleans, a coastal engineer. We had social scientists. We had people from all different trades, but April was able to sort of bring them together and make them look alike, which I think was a real magical thing for us.
And what about the other two pairs? Any concerns or challenges going into working with a learning designer for the purposes that you were doing it? Or was it just, well, I need to figure out how to do this?
I remember starting with Jim. I mean, my background's all online education, and Jim's basically face-to-face. So there's some issues there. I remember making some suggestions for how Jim should lay out his course content for his class in his Canvas space. Angel, that's too long ago. in his Canvas space. And it was interesting to understand that some of the things that we live by in the online world don't necessarily translate to face-to-face. There's just some organization choices that Jim couldn't act upon. So it was a little eye-opening there, but I hope also I hope Jim took away some of my online expertise that he could then integrate into his face-to-face class.
Yeah, so one example I think was the syllabus. And I like to have the syllabus in the modules right at the top. Because on a year-to-year basis, I modify the syllabus according to the breadth of the and diversity of the students. With 200 students, these aren't all populated from biomedical engineering or MATSE. I'll have a pretty large chunk of chemical engineers, for example, that are in the course, and biology students and things of this nature. So I'll often modify the syllabus, and I'll give a tentative syllabus, and then I'll create a slightly different version to better accommodate the collection of students. So I always put the home page as the modules, so that these are engineering students for the most part, and they want to see what they're going to be taking basically from day one. And so I put the syllabus up there, and then I vary the versions from version 1 through version final. And then the rest of the course, the modules are different units, and I build it from there. One of the things that Mark helped me with a lot, especially during the time of COVID, was the pages. It gets pretty dry looking at listening to me for 50 minutes, 3 days a week. And I wanted something to liven it up. Jeopardy went by the wayside because there was no way to run Jeopardy on Zoom. And so the pages helped a lot. And I found there's a huge sea of YouTube videos out there, even around surface energetics. And so that livened it up a great deal, because one, they didn't have to listen to me constantly. And two, Mark showed me how to set up the pages with the series of videos that I had discovered. And that worked out very nicely to break up the lectures a bit. So I did my best to accommodate Mark's suggestions, but it really was quite a nice collaboration and continues to be so. And this course is going to continue to evolve, because I'm taking the students from basic principles to actually calculating surface free energy at solid liquid interfaces in biological systems. So it will continue to evolve, Mark.
Kiran and Jane, any challenges? I know you mentioned some of the peer reviews and the technology, but it sounds like she had everything going. When Jane was describing that last question, I pictured you, Kiara, with like 8 arms, just juggling all of the things all at once.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Jane. Go ahead.
I would say our biggest challenge was trying to mold the technology for the teaching strategy. And that was a big challenge for me. Those of you that know me, I really like that kind of challenge, to try and make the technology work for what we're wanting to do. But it was frustrating for me when the technology was limited, like trying to get things to work for her the way she wanted to present, because I just thought her ideas were so good about her engagement level with the students and things. So that was a challenge for me, and that Canvas didn't do everything we wanted it to do. The polling in Zoom was not doing what we wanted it to do. Poll Everywhere ended up working really well for her. She had less than 40 students, so that allowed us to use that technology pretty well. Even I thought PowerPoint there at the end, when we were trying to get it to work with everything, was not quite cooperating the way it should. So I felt like most of our frustrations were just trying to get the technology to do what we wanted it to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And in fact, I'd say that I don't remember any major challenges. I think whenever maybe the steepest part of the learning curve for me was on the Canvas side, like to set up the quizzes, because I'd never done it before. But Jane was always super responsive over email. I remember at some point, she also gave me her phone number that I save on my agenda. And I did say this to her under the name SOS Jane. And so whenever I'd have an emergency, I'd call her up, and then she would be super quick at answering. And so I don't remember, again, maybe my personal biggest challenges were Canvas, but Jane, SOS Jane, was always super helpful, super helpful with that.
So for each group, and I'm not even going to call on anybody for this one, I just wanted to see what you all think and shout out at whenever. What would you say your biggest takeaway from the partnership would be? What's the biggest takeaway that you had or have from that?
I would say that Mark Worley knows his stuff. Period.
I might agree with that, even though, technically he's not my partner, but I agree with that statement.
That's great.
I think I know where to find, I know how to look for answers. I think that's an important thing. And I would say, like I alluded to earlier, it was eye-opening for me to be situated in what's typically a face-to-face classroom and understanding the differences again, because most of my background is online, and I did take away some of the things from the face-to-face classes and how to do instructional design in that situation.
And one of the things that I took away was the fact I'll always use Zoom from now on, even though I plan to be squarely situated in the classroom face to face. I will record my lectures on Zoom and provide, and I teach senior level courses, and these kids are interviewing. They can't make all the courses or all the lectures. And so I like that. And I like occasionally, even though I find it agonizing, to watch myself give lecture and see how I can improve my lecture style.
That's great, Jim. That's great.
Oh, the other thing I like about Zoom, like I had 27 homework groups this past spring semester, and Zoom is much easier to organize and find mutually agreeable times than in my office type meetings. And so I will continue to use Zoom for that as well. And Mark is always pointing out cool things that I know nothing about that he makes it easy to implement.
Yeah, I guess for me, the main thing for me is taking a class or classes that would have been very dry. We can write the materials. As a scientist, I can write the materials, but April basically transformed them to make them visually more appealing. But more than that, she made them more engaging. And that was also with technologies that I was totally unaware of. And she helped me get to the point where we have every module, almost every module has a lab. And it's really hard to design labs that students can learn quickly and instead of worrying about the technology, the students would actually learn something from the data. And so, for example, at the beginning we had 5 different programs. We were using Google Earth, we were using Stella, we were using lots of web interfaces, and we've now whittled it down to all the classes. Basically, the driving platform is Google Earth. We have some Stella labs and modeling labs in addition, but it was April who helped sort of condense that down to technology that the students could understand. So the labs work really well in terms of learning and pedagogy. But the other thing is, in terms of, instead of just having materials that are sitting out there and students have to get motivated to read them, I post a video every day with a Snagit or Screencast-O-Matic. And that was, April really helped me figure that one out too. So every day students get a little primer from me on a topic that relevant to the week, to the week's module. So this is, we're talking about the carbon cycle. So this week we're talking about respiration, permafrost, photosynthesis, the impact of Amazon deforestation on CO2, things like that. And so really, I think it's really helped us get more engaging. And then there are also things where I thought, oh, well, wouldn't it be cool for us to have a student publication from our capstone exercises? And I said that to April and said, I didn't have a clue as to how we would do that. And immediately she came up with this Pressbooks idea, and we'll be launching or publishing our first edition of Pressbooks in about a month probably. And that was also as a result of this partnership.
It's great. And yeah, it's for those who might not know, Pressbooks is an online open publishing platform for open materials, which is really great that they're participating in that. Other takeaways from folks?
Maybe mine is that there are a lot of very useful tools that are used in online courses that can be perfectly incorporated in classes that are taught in person. And so a lot of the things that I've learned in the COVID year, and again, that Jane helped me a lot with, I'm still using them, and I think I'll keep using them for a long time because they're very helpful, and they help creating a more like diverse environment where people can learn in different ways. Maybe I also, like Jim, I do record my lectures. I keep recording my lectures in Zoom, and I post them online so that if people want to go and listen to them again, they can. And that's something that I was not doing before because I had never used Zoom before. So there's lots of, this is just one example, there's lots of very, very, very useful tools that I think all of us should be aware and should try to incorporate as best as we can into our lectures to the extent that it's feasible. So that was the biggest takeaway for me.
Great. That's great. I think Annie had a couple of questions that had come in.
Yeah, thanks. Well, one, just a quick, sorry, phone was ringing right when I did that. First, just a comment, for the faculty, the authors, the instructors, I've been in this field for 30 years, and the first 20 was as an instructional designer. And I just want you to know that we learn so much from you. Stevie holds a weekly learning design meeting, and we often do a show and tell and go around, and your teaching strategies, while you may or may not have known how to adapt them to an online world, are just so cool. And we love hearing about how you're doing different things. And we turn around and we add those to our toolkit. And then we tell other faculty, well, in Jim Adair's class, he did this, or in Tim Braylauer's class, he did that. So you have a legacy you may not even know about. But my question for you, and really you started to hit on this, that you do a lot of cool things in your classes, and you all, I know for a fact, are amazing instructors. And it sounds like you learned how to use some really cool technology tools over the last year in particular. But I'm wondering if there are any strategies, any ways of teaching that you've changed because of, or just as a side effect of your collaboration. Do you teach something differently now? Not just thinking technology, but just, did something occur to you because of this partnership that has changed the way that you teach your subject, whether it's face-to-face or online? I hope that made sense.
Well, what I learned is that it's fairly easy to convey knowledge and facts and things of that nature. But to cement it in a student's mind is an altogether higher order challenge. And therefore, I've taken the basic didactic training, because these are the first biomaterial courses these students have seen. And I think of it like building a house. The foundation is the basic knowledge. And I emphasize that what we think we know today, at least half of that 20 years from now will be refuted in some manner or form. So I emphasize to the students, I'm unreliable, and they really have to think carefully about everything I say, because it may turn out to not be so true in 20 years, right in the midst of their career. So I like them challenging me, but I build the foundation with the didactic training, and that's the Jeopardy and the lecture notes and things of that nature. But I try to cement it with the homework. And I set up the homework so that the students, they have to pick a human malady or disease, and they have to develop through, and I give them 5 homeworks where they have to ask fundamental questions that medical scientists and engineers and collaborative teams have to ask, starting with, well, what's the disease? How many people are affected in the United States and worldwide? And what's the nature of the disease? Is it a pathogen or, whatever? And then they take that and they build on that week after week. I give them all the homework assignments the first week of class. So they if they're a really organized group, they can finish up halfway through the semester, and I'm fine with that. I grade all homeworks myself. I do not farm it out to the TA at all. I often return homeworks that don't meet my scientific standards for well-written scientific documents. And they have rules for that too. I call it best practices in technical and scientific writing. And so a lot of it has to do with the engagement, but a lot of it has to do, the students who are really engaged about halfway through the semester realize what I'm up to, and they usually buy in pretty soundly.
Other folks? For Annie's question?
Yeah, I think for me, it was the fact that I started incorporating my iPad into my lectures. And I think this was one of Jane's first suggestions to me, because again, this was right at the beginning of the switch. And I think, Jane, you showed me how you were doing it with your iPad. What is it? No, you don't have an iPad. You have no, you do? But you have the fancy version. I have the basic version. Which one do you have?
I have the Pro with the pencil.
The Pro, exactly. So you showed me that and I was like so impressed. I was like, wow, this is terrific. So I bought like a basic version of an iPad, and then I started playing with it. And so now I know how to like connect the iPad so that I'm kind of connected in 2 modes, and I can share my screen on the iPad right away. And it was like impressive to me how much more, like, cause I like writing on the board quite a lot. But then when I write on the iPad, like it's so much more clear to the students, and they can follow so much better what I write there. And again, it never occurred to me, but this was one of her suggestions, and this was one of the things that I tried, and I'm still using. So thank you. That was a great suggestion.
And I think they had some really good questions during class based on those drawings, because they could see them so well, and you were not that you don't face them when you're writing the board, but you're able to see questions coming in easier than if your back is to them and you're write it on the board. So it just helps them feel more comfortable too, to ask questions during class as well, easier to do that.
And you record all of these. I mean, when you write on the iPad, it gets all recorded and documented as well. That's fantastic. I like that.
Yeah, that's
Mark,
cool.
we're going to have a chat.
Tim, is there anything that I know you teach online pretty much fully now, but was there anything that you ended up altering or doing a little differently even in your resident courses as a result of this huge project that you and April have undertaken?
Yeah, because we initially had our big online courses, but we actually started many of them as blended or hybrid, where we would have a smaller group of students who were usually teaching in Dike 240, and we would have the lecture all be online and the lab be face-to-face. So they'd come in and we would typically have them on a Thursday, and they would be required to have read all the lecture materials and come in and do the lab with us, and we would walk around the room. So I was doing the first one I did was with Brent Yarnell, and we taught the processes, hazards, and policy course together, the coastal course, and we would mingle around and walk around. But I think what learning from April and learning from what she taught me about the online design and the online sort of pedagogy, I learned that most of these environments are actually pretty similar. It was easier to be able to walk around and point at people and say, do it this way, do it that way, click here, click there, or ask them. You'd be able to go further in a hybrid class than you would in a fully online class. But I think I learned that some of the technologies that we were using in fully online class that I talked about work pretty well in the hybrid environment as well. And so I think now that I am mostly fully online now, but I will be doing a hybrid class next semester. I think the main thing that I've taken away is that these are pretty similar environments, even though initially I thought fully online on the left, 100 degrees apart from that is the face-to-face. Now you've got all sorts of intermediaries, and I think that's even more true now that we've had this sort of the COVID year. And I think now what we are positioned to do, and I haven't really talked to April about this yet, so this might come as a surprise, is write something or maybe write a commentary or write a publication on how to engage, because so many more universities now in the geosciences are interested in online learning, with the possibility of hate to say it, future pandemic, or just the way the students are changing. A lot of students haven't come back. There's a bigger market that everybody's realizing now.
Yeah. I was going to say there was an instructor in our meteorology and atmospheric science department who did a programming class during COVID and was convinced that this could, because he walked around the lab and the technology was all in the lab that the students would be working on. And I think what he discovered was that what switched pedagogically for him was when they were online, he wasn't the only person helping the students anymore. If a student got stuck, they would have that student share their screen, and then everybody was able to go in and help them to fix the programming problem. So it turned from just the instructor is helping you as you're doing this lab to the whole class is collaborating together and helping one person with the lab, which I thought was a really interesting twist for the pedagogy of that particular class. I only have one more question, and then we can open it up to a general discussion. And that is, and this is mostly for the faculty members, but also for the designers. What would you say to a colleague who was considering reaching out to have a collaboration with a designer? What would your advice or suggestion to them be?
Go
going into
for it.
Just do it. Just do it.
Yeah. Okay. Jim, what were you going to
Go
say?
for it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd qualify that a bit. I would say at Penn State, especially in EMS, go for it. But I do a lot of these. I used to do a lot. I'm not doing as many, but I used to do program reviews. Having been a department head, I used to get called on to go to, 20 universities around the country talking to them about reviewing programs, and many of them were talking about getting into the online environment. And I would say, do you have a learning design team there in, at Texas A&M, for example? And no. And I said, well, you might want to be a little bit, you might want to go about this deliberately and a little slowly before you just jump in. And I would tell them about my experience and what we had available to us. So I'd say I agree with the others in terms of go for it at Penn State. But I think at other places it's a little more difficult.
Yeah.
I'd like to follow up with on Tim's comment. I was on the external advisory board for another university, my alma mater. And one of the things that came out this past spring in the meeting was that the use of Zoom was usually asynchronous. In other words, the instructors were lecturing into their computer and then just simply posting the videos online. And I heard this from the students in particular. Whereas here at Penn State, we had that week, that spring break week of intense instruction and support in EMS from E-Dutton. And I only had one little glitch that first Monday after two of the students didn't realize that when they had the mic on, the whole 200 people could hear them talk. And they were trying to set up some sort of tryst. And I said, guys, we can hear you. And that's the only glitch I had. It was seamless for the rest of the time.
Okay. And going forward, is it your sense that other faculty members might, I don't know, reach out to learn to use new things, or to use new technologies, or to try to modify what they're doing in any way? Looks like
I think to implement that, we're going to faculty who have had this great experience need to reach out to our respective departments and see if we can't get a little faculty meeting time to talk about the developments that we've been able to move forward with so quickly.
Yeah, that's a great idea. It's a great idea. Well, at that point, I don't have any other questions for you all, but I wanted to just take a minute or so and first of all, thank you all for participating very, very much. And secondly, just ask if you have any final thoughts about these kinds of collaborations and just in general.
Well, I just wanted to follow up just on what Jim was saying there. And I wasn't kidding about this being a silver lining to COVID, because like Mark said, we usually are working mostly with online programs and online classes. And I love that. But this opportunity to work with so many residential instruction faculty in our college was super rewarding for me. It was one of the best professional years I've had in just getting back into my background is in the classroom. And I just really enjoyed getting to know so many of our faculty and the incredible instruction and how much they care about our students and that they're learning and how they're learning and making sure they're still learning. They could have thrown in the towel really easily during COVID, and they didn't. It was like, this is super important to my students learning. How do I do this? And that was an awesome and exciting challenge for me personally. And I just ate it up. I just really liked getting to know so many faculty and learning more about different programs and what they're trying to do and what our students are doing. And then, yeah, getting to sit in on so many classes. There's a lot of classes that I personally would like to take that were a lot better than when I was here, how many years ago. So I think we're doing a great job. And I don't know, as teaching faculty, I get to hear that enough, just how awesome their teaching really is. We just get to hear about the teachers that have checked out, and I didn't meet any of them. So I'm, that's just my takeaway. from this experience. And I really, really hope that we're able to continue to help resident instruction faculty as well as our online faculty going forward. Because I just think that our college as a whole will just get that much better in that collaboration too.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Jane. And I will say one of the things that I loved when I was a learning designer was, you know, I'm not a material scientist. I'm not an energy engineer. I'm never going to be a geoscientist, but I get to learn a little bit about the subject, right? Like somebody can say a word, I'll be like, I know where that belongs. I don't necessarily know what it is or how to do it, but I kind of know what field that belongs in. And I always thought that was kind of a neat thing too.
I did want to point out, I don't know, maybe I just had eagle ears this morning at the dean's faculty meeting, but he specifically said that it was a silver lining out of this last year that we are now also helping resident instruction. So that's not going away. And it really has been fun. I mean, so many of you we have worked with, I know, for years, but not everybody. And we just I feel like our family's gotten bigger, and it's really been fun. And again, just we learn as much from you as you hopefully get from working with us. So we look forward to many, many, many more years of collaboration.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I had joked to my mother that this was the first time in 20 years that people actually knew what I did. Because when before, when you'd say you were an instructional designer or a learning designer, people would be like, I'm not really sure, what does that mean exactly? And now people know what that is. So that's a great thing. And we're excited to continue, consulting and working with faculty members. And I can't think of a better way to wrap it up than that. So I will just say thanks to everyone. Appreciate your time and this conversation, and look forward to continuing to work with you however need be.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.